All right, so we're back and we've had some technical difficulties, so I've had to restart this section a couple of times now. Hopefully I can get through it. I've only got just like 2 pages left of chapter 4, so let's get to it. Chapter 4, page 82, how boundaries are developed and how trauma affects that. Up until now, we've dealt with the characteristics of family relating. Withdrawal, hostility, and setting inappropriate limits are ways parents act toward their children. Over time, these become ingrained in the soul of the child. In addition, specific traumas can injure boundary development. A trauma is an intensely painful emotional experience rather than a character pattern. Emotional, physical, and sexual abuse are traumatic. Accidents and debilitating illness are traumatic. Severe losses, such as the death of a parent, divorce, or extreme financial hardship, are also traumatic. A good way to look at the difference between character relating patterns such as withdrawal and hostility and trauma is to look at how a tree in a forest can be hurt. It can be fed inappropriately through bad ingredients in the soil, or it can be given too much or too little sun or water. That's an illustration of character pattern problems. Trauma is like lightning hitting the tree. Great analogy. A trauma can affect boundary development because it shakes up 2 necessary foundations to children's growth. Number 1, the world is reasonably safe, and number 2, they have control over their lives. Children who undergo trauma feel these foundations shaken up. They become unsure that they are safe and protected in the world, and they become frightened that they have no say-so in any danger that approaches them. Jerry had been physically abused by both of his parents for years. He had left home early, joined the Marines, and had several failed relationships and bad marriages. In therapy as an adult in his late 30s, he began realizing why, under his tough exterior, he always longed for controlling women. He'd fall madly in love with the fact that they could, quote-unquote, handle him. Then a pattern of compliance to the woman would emerge, with Jerry always on the losing end. One day in session, Jerry remembered his mother striking him across the face for some small infraction. He vividly recalled his vain attempts to protect himself, pleading, "Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll do anything you say. Please, Mom." When he promised unquestioning obedience, the hitting would stop. That memory tied in with his lack of power and control with his wives and girlfriends. Their anger always terrified him, and he would instantly comply. Jerry's boundary development was seriously injured by his mother's abuse. The heart of God seems to beat especially close to the victim of trauma. Quote, "He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted." God desires the wounds of the traumatized to be bound up by loving people. Victims of trauma in the family are almost always recipients of poor or sinful character relating patterns. Withdrawal from our boundaries and hostility toward our boundaries are the ground from which trauma springs. Our own character traits. Have you ever heard someone described as being that way from the womb? Perhaps you were always active and confrontive, always exploring new horizons, or maybe you like to be quiet and reflective since forever. We contribute to our own boundary issues by our own individual character styles. For example, some people with a continually greater amount of aggression deal with boundary problems more confrontationally, and some with less aggression shy away from boundaries. Our sinfulness. We also contribute to our own boundary development problems by our own depravity. Depravity is what we inherited from Adam and Eve. It is our resistance to being creatures under God, our resistance to humility. It's a refusal to accept our position and a lust for being omnipotent and in charge, not needing anyone and not accountable to anyone. Our depravity enslaves us to the law of sin and death, from which only Christ can save us. By now, you should be gaining a clear picture of what goes into the boundary problems and boundary development. It's time now to look at what the Bible says about how boundaries should operate in our lives and how they can be developed all through our lives. So that's the end of chapter 4. It's pretty intense stuff. I would encourage you to, plug into people who are loving and kind and gracious to support you through your boundary journey. And if you are looking for someone to walk with you through these issues and how they show up in your life in the areas of food, finances, relationships, and relationships with your adult children, relationships with your kids, relationships with your parents as an adult, let me know. This has become some of my life's work. So I would love to join you in that process. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening and enjoy the first weekend of December. And I will be posting again tomorrow as part of my 30 days with boundaries and sharing the things that are closest to my heart and how they've benefited me. I hope it's a gift to you as well. Have a great night. Bye-bye.